Okay, hi again. In our continued efforts to educate each other, in this respect, we try to focus on our small-scale farmers whose average yields in maize at the moment nationally stands at about 1.6 tons per hectare. We want to try and raise that, if possible, to 5 tons per hectare national average. But then we can't do this if we still lagging behind in the basics. The basics like good fertilizing practices, good tillage practices, good weeding practices, pest control, and all such things. Of course, there are certain things that we can't control, like water that is dependent on rain. Small-scale farmers have no access to irrigation. But then let's look at the fertilizing part of it today. Simple basics, which we're going to remind ourselves of what we have discussed before. But we'll quickly look at this. If the camera can pick this, I'll go through this so that we don't miss out important points. Just remember also that this is not exhaustive. We can't talk about everything. The important thing first to do is to know the status of your soil. That's why we emphasize on soil sampling. It might sound strange to some people, but it's a practice that has been done for a very long time by all farmers. Commercial farmers do this quite a lot. It's a simple thing. Take your soil from various places of the field and take those samples to the lab. The lab will tell you what your soil is made up of, in terms of clay, sand, silt, and all such things. And it will also tell you the chemical properties. By that we mean how much potassium in there, how much phosphorus is there, and so on. So once you've known that, with the help of an agronomist, then you should be able to know how much fertilizer to actually apply to meet your crop needs. We should also be reminded of what we have already discussed. Given a situation where you want to apply urea or nitrogen, urea is usually cheap. It's probably the cheapest form of nitrogen, but then its efficiency is not as good. It's got low efficiency because of many soil factors. For example, if you want a quick uptake of your nitrogen, choose to use ammonium nitrate instead of urea. Why? Because the plant absorbs nitrogen in the form of nitrates. So for urea, it has to convert first to nitrate before it gets available to the plant. So that delays the process of nitrogen uptake. And you will see if you use ammonium nitrate and urea, there will be a quick reaction in the change of color of your crop if you apply ammonium nitrate. So more elaboration could be done later, but for now, we'll just go straight to the points. And if you are using urea, very important part, we've got two farmers here. Let's say one, Mr. Keith Hanzala, two, Mr. Emmanuel Smenda, and Mr. Keith Hanzala decides to apply his urea after it has rained. The soil is wet and he thinks a good time, let me go and apply the urea. He's going to lose a lot of that to volatilization. And Mr. Emmanuel Smenda, who applies his urea just before the rain, gets the better result. You will see that in your crop. So remember that wet soil, unless it is immediately followed by rain, but if it's wet and it's going to take long before rain, you're going to lose a lot of that nitrogen, to volatilization. It will not benefit you. You see, it's always a good practice to reap your soils. What is reaping? It's just actually going deeper, using a plow, or not a plow, using a reaper to go deeper in the soil profile. You break the pan, the plow layer pan, and when you do that, one, the benefit is that you're going to get your water percolation deeper into the root zone. And two, if you have used gypsum, which I'm going to talk about, if you have used gypsum, because gypsum will isolate your salts, and make them stand alone. Now, if you have not flushed them, they will just sit somewhere there on the hard pan. But if you have ripped, then when you get rain, actually rain will come and flush those bicarbonates away from your root zone. So ripping is a good practice, both to aid, the performance of your fertilizers, and also to get water to your roots, So gypsum is not lime. I've heard many people say, no, I applied gypsum. Yes. But if you have a problem of pH, and your pH is too low, don't apply gypsum in hoping to correct it. No. Gypsum's role is merely to it's like a soil conditioner, if I may call it. What am I talking about? If you've got a problem with sodium in your soil, gypsum will help. Sodium is a salt. Gypsum will help to reduce that sodium. Isolate it. If it's sodium chloride, for example, it will separate the two, take away the sodium, and sodium will stand alone. That's now where you need your ripping. When you have ripped nicely and water comes, rainfall comes, it will flush it down deeper in the profile. So gypsum provides you with calcium and sulfur. For example, the tomato growers, and the groundnut growers, calcium is very key in those plants. So when you have used gypsum, it will become a source of your calcium. It will also become a source of sulfur. In soybeans, sulfur is very critical. Even calcium is also critical in soybeans. And so gypsum, I'll repeat, is not lime. They two do separate things. If you have applied gypsum, you can still apply lime. So lime, we have two types. There is the calcitic and the dolomitic lime. In calcitic lime, there's more calcium in it. In dolomitic lime, there is calcium as well, but more of magnesium. So each one of them has a specific role to play. Depending on the soil analysis, you will know whether you need to apply calcitic lime or dolomitic lime. And what does lime do? It simply tries to neutralize the pH. The ideal pH for your crop growth, it starts from about 5 going up. Anything below that, a lot of your nutrients, a lot of your elements will not be available to the plant. We've discussed that before, and we've given a table of availability of the various nutrients. So lime is very, very cheap. It's a very, very cheap product, lime. In fact, what is more expensive about it is the transportation of it rather than the actual material. So please let farmers use lime. Very, very important. Banding, the difference between banding and broadcasting. In maize, you're always better off banding because the phosphates in your base of fertilizers are very immobile in the soil. And if you are going to broadcast, it means you have phosphates scattered almost everywhere in very small quantities, But when you band, you're actually concentrating your phosphates closer to the root zone. So try as much as possible to band your fertilizer and not just to broadcast. It helps. The results have shown positive results. All trials, there's no doubt about that. It's just something that we have to remind ourselves of. There's also a tendency by our friends, small-scale farmers. Sometimes they receive the base of fertilizer or they buy the base of fertilizer late. And at the same time, they've also received the urea or ammonium nitrate or whatever. So what do? They would want to mix the two and apply maybe when the crop is 2 weeks late, 3 weeks old rather. 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, they say let's do that. Fine, you will still get some nutrients, but you will not get a good result compared to applying your base of fertilizer first at planting. So it's not a good practice. I understand why it's done, but it's not a good practice. Where you can avoid it, avoid it. rotation is something very, very key. If you've been growing maize, no, try and put some soybean and break that sequence, that monoculture, as we call it, one cropping, monocropping, one crop after another. Try and break that. Maybe after every year or 2 years, put some soybeans there, put some sunflower there, put some groundnuts in there, or sunhemp. I know that sunhemp doesn't really have much value, commercial value, but if you've got a lot of land, to be able to rotate around, you can afford to put sunhemp and then plow it in just as it begins to flower. But for things like groundnuts, you will harvest something, soybeans, you harvest something, but they still leave something in there. So crop rotation is very, very good. Symptoms. What do you see when you're lacking certain things? Nitrogen, I think this is one which is very common among people. When they see their leaves are yellowing, they know, oh, I've got no nitrogen in that soil. But yellowing can start from the top or from the bottom. Usually that which starts from the top is associated with sulfur deficiency. But that which comes from the bottom is nitrogen deficiency. Why? Because nitrogen is very mobile in the plant. When the plant has run out of nitrogen, it will mobilize the nitrogen from the lower leaves and push it up the top of the plant. That's the one which has got these tissues that are actively dividing and growing, so they need support. So that's where the nitrogen goes. And remember also that any leaf, one leaf showing nitrogen deficiency is equal to 10% yield loss. So if your yield potential was 10 tons, then you see one leaf is already showing nitrogen deficiency, then subtract 10% of that. So let's try and avoid nitrogen deficiency because it costs money. It really does. If you are going to see your cobs, you open your cobs, the top part is not full, as you would want to see it in other cobs. The top part of the cob is not full, then you know you've had some potassium deficiency. And again, if you see a cob, open your cob and see some holes in there, in other words, some pips, some grains haven't developed, then most likely you've had boron deficiency. I'm saying most likely because sometimes it can just result from poor pollination, and poor pollination is caused by many other factors. But most likely it will be boron deficiency. You see, these are some of the symptoms that you will see in your crop. And when you see that, then you should know, okay, next time I think I should deal with this issue. And if it happens all the time, then you know that your soil has a real problem. You need expert advice from an agronomist to actually bring your soil to the required levels of crop nutrition. I hope this information will help. Like I always say, it's intended for our small-scale farmers. It's basic information. It will probably be of no value to a commercial farmer because they've heard this before, they have done them before. But for our small-scale farmers out there, hopefully this information will help us to bring up our yields of maize from 2 tons to say 5 tons. Thank you so much.